Continuing with Book 3, Chapter 11, Verse 15. But as none of these works has come into existence without some cause, that cause, whatever it is displayed in what is produced. Whoever appears as, or whatever appears as ignorance or illusion, has some appearance of intelligence or truth. Just like the illusion of the world, seen in a dream, displays the effect of consciousness within us. Just like the illusion of the world in a dream is not without our inner consciousness of it. In the same way, Brahma was not unconscious of the expansion of the world at the beginning of creation. All that we see about us is situated in the divine soul. There is no other world that rises and sets except what is imprinted in our minds. As fluidity is another name for water and fluctuation, the same with wind. And as sunshine is nothing other than light, so the world is nothing but Brahma displayed in nature. As the appearance of a city resides in the inner consciousness of a person who is conscious of his dreaming, in the same manner, the world is displayed in the Supreme Soul. So verse 20 is a very clear expression of how the world is just like a lucid dream. We see it in our consciousness. And it has all the appearance of a lucid dream. We're aware that the body is not sleeping. The body is active. But the dreamlike quality of the world continues. Verse 21. Brahma, if it is so, then tell me, O Holy One, from where do we get our belief of this materiality? How is it that this unreal and visionary impression presents its baneful aspect to us? If the view is in existence, there must be its viewer also. When there is the viewer, there is the view likewise. As long as either of these is in existence, there is our bondage. Our liberation chiefly depends on the disappearance of both, which can hardly take place. It is entirely impossible to be liberated as long as our notion of this view is not lost in our minds. Unless the view is vanished, both from the vision of the eyes and mind, no one can even form an idea in his mind of liberation. Again, the representation of the view at first and its obliteration afterwards are not enough for our liberation, because the memory of the view is sufficient to bind the soul. Moreover, When the picture of the view is impressed on the soul and reflected in the mirror of the mind, there is no need for its recollection, for what is deeply rooted in the soul comes out of itself. The intellect, which at first was without the notion of phenomena, would be entitled to liberation. But once it has seen, it has taken on the impression of what it has seen. Now, sage, please use your reasoning to remove my hopelessness of liberation, which I imagine is unattainable by any. Vasishtha said, "Hear me, Ram, explain to you at length how the unreal world, with all its contents, appears to us as real. For unless it is explained to you by my reasoning, stories, and examples, this doubt will not, in your breast like mud, settles in a lake. Then, Rama, you will be able to conduct yourself on earth as one assured that creation and existence of the world are false concepts. You will then remain like a rock against the impression of wealth and poverty and of gain and loss, and whether your relations with anything is fleeting or lasting." So what is Vasishtha saying when he begins this answer? Ram is still, by his description, not yet established as the silent witness. He is seeing that the phenomenal world has some dreamlike quality, but he finds that is impressed strongly in his mind, and that's where the problem is. He believes that he must be completely divorced of the world, not even have a single impression of it in order to reach liberation. And what Vasishtha is saying is, there's something that needs to be cleared up that is stopping you from being detached from the world and established in the silent witness. And that's something, of course, we know as individual karmic traces. See, Ram, life is the life of someone just like us, lost in the samsara, and then establishing connection with the silent witness, then becoming the silent witness, then becoming free of the bondage of samsara and achieving the state of moksha. So these are all very much related to what we may be experiencing. And so what Vasishtha is going to be saying are fundamental truths that will balance individual karmic traces that are creating this inability of maintaining oneness with the silent witness. We've all had this type of experience. We gain this connection with the silent witness. We strive to become one with the silent witness, but still there's so much going on, keeping us from letting go of the memories of the world, the deep impressions in our soul. Somehow we can't let them go and become the silence. This is where Ram is now. Balancing of these individual karmic traces by Vasishta's words are going to allow Ram and us to remain established in the silent witness as the silent witness. Then the world takes on its proper perspective as just an illusion, a dream in the mind. Verse 32. Know that there is only one spirit, which is self-existent. All else is mere fiction. Now this is in direct conflict with our experience. We feel that we exist and spirit exists, and that is not true. Only spirit exists, only consciousness exists. Everything else that we thought and even have a memory of as existing is illusion. I will now tell you how the three worlds were produced in form. This is a powerful dose of divine karmic traces, right? How the three worlds were produced and formed is pure divine activity, divine karmic traces that will be having a great balancing effect on our knowledge constructs. The only thing that's keeping us separate, the only thing that's making us existent is the knowledge, individual knowledge constructs. Once these have been cleared to a certain extent, we become one with the divine knowledge constructs, and that's an important milestone, an important place to arrive at. That is moksha level 1. That's another definition of moksha level 1. Being in complete harmony and unity, yoga, with divine karmic traces. Moksha level 1 is that. 33. It was from him that all these beings have come to existence, while he of himself is all and everything in it. He likewise appears to us and disappears also, both as forms and their appearances, and as the mind and its faculties, and as figures and their shapes, and as modes and motions of all things. So now as we strive to remain established in the silent witness, and we read chapter 12, detailed description of original creation, elements in their subtle forms. The following statements will be completely balancing to any residual individual karmic trace knowledge construct, like wiping off the window with a cloth. We'll be able to very easily see and connect with and become the silent witness, and remain established in that without the distraction of any streaks or blurs on the window. Vasishtha said, from the state of perfect stillness and tranquility of the supremely Holy Spirit, the universe rose to being in the manner that you must hear with your best understanding and attention. So he's giving us the instruction. What is our best understanding and attention? Well, that is obviously being established in and being the silent witness. That is our best understanding and attention. As sound sleep displays itself in visionary dreams, so Brahma manifests himself in the works of creation, of which he is the soul and receptacle. This is exactly what we've been saying. The entire world is like a dream in the mind of the Creator. The world, which of its nature is continually progressive in its course, is identified with the essence of that being, whose form is self-same with the indescribable glory of his eternally brilliant intellect. Chintatma, the wish-fulfilling jewel. This intellect, Chit, or cosmic consciousness, before assuming to itself consciousness or the knowledge of self, gets by itself and in itself an exercise of intellection, of thought. This is the first stage in the perception by the soul. Then this thinking intellect, Chet, gets the notion, Buddha, knowledge or truth, of some faint images, Uhita rupas, which are pure and lighter than air, and which receive their names and forms only later. The innate ideas are born before the embryonic mind or soul. Afterwards, this transcendent essence, intellect consciousness, becomes an intelligent principle, Sacheta, eager for intelligence, Chaitanya. It is now worthy of its name as intellect, or Chit, on account of its having attained what is called intelligence. Intellect attains intelligence. Lastly, it takes the form of gross consciousness, Ganasam Vedana, and receives the name of the individual soul, Jiva, as the living cosmic soul or Hiranyagarbha. It now loses its divine nature by reflecting on itself. Then this living principle is involved in thoughts relating only to the world. But its nature depends on the divine essence, as the fallacy of the snake depends on the substance of the rope. Afterwards, An empty space rises into being called calm, vayu, which is the seed or source of the property of sound, and which later becomes expressive of meaning. Next in order, the elements of egoism and duration are produced in the individual soul. These two terms are the roots of the existence of future worlds. This ideal knowledge in divine spirit of the unreal forms of the network of the world are made to appear as a reality by omnipotent power. Thus, the ideal self-consciousness became the seed or root of the tree of desire that ego fluctuates in the form of air. The intellect, in the form of airy ego, thinks on the elements of sounds, shabda ten mantram, the element of sound in its subtle form. And it becomes, by degrees, denser than the rarefied air and produces the element of mind. Sound is the seed or root of words that later become diverse in the forms of names or nouns and significant terms. It's worthwhile noting here that in the evolution of the development of the universe, it appears that intellect first takes on this connection with the element of sound, shabda ten mantram. This is why we use a mantra, the sound of a thought that's a precursor to a thought. A thought has some meaning and direction. Mantra has only direction without meaning. So when performing dharana, we use a mantra. And by using this mantra, it will take the awareness back to this level of intellect in the form of airy ego. And that is only a tiny step away from divine spirit, omnipotent power. So that's the value of our use of a special mantra for transcending, because it naturally has only one quality, which is direction. And that direction can only be to its source. As Maharishi used to say, the source of thought. And what is the source of thought? The intellect in the form of airy ego. Continuing verse 14. Sound is the seed or root of words that later became diverse in the forms of names or nouns and significant terms. So now we see how sound begins to take on meaning when we are allowing it to do so. And this meaning that it takes on is a color of the activity of thinking. And the color of the activity of thinking is a karmic trace. So the meaning of a sound is a connection with the karmic trace from which it has arisen. Words evolved and became as numerous as shoots on trees, and as varied as inflected speech, sentences, and the collection of Vedas and other scriptures. It is from this Supreme Spirit that all these worlds derive their beauty, and the multitude of words, which sprang from sounds, full of meaning, became widespread. Consciousness, expressed as this family of its offspring, is described as the living soul, or jiva, which afterwards became the source of all forms of beings known under a variety of expressions. From this individual soul sprang the 14 kinds of living beings that fill the cells in the bowels of all worlds. It was then that consciousness, by emotion and inflation of itself, and as instantaneously as a thought, became the subtle form element, tanmatra, of touch. So now we see the evolving of the senses that exist in the silent witness, the absolute transcendental senses in the Yoga Sutras. Pratibha, Pratibha, Vada, Pratibha, Varta, Pratibha Vedana, Pratibha Darshasa. These are the subtle transcendental forms of the senses that arrive from this first thought without any meaning, only direction, that evolves into thought with meaning, and then from that arises the subtle form element of touch and feeling, the air. So thought without a meaning, associated with akasha, empty space. The element of touch and feeling associated with vayu, air. Which was yet without name or action. This breath caused air which expanded itself and filled all bodies that are object of touch and feeling. The air, which is the seed root of the tree of tangibles, then developed itself into branches composed of the various kinds of winds that cause breath and motion in all beings. Then, at its pleasure, and from its idea of light, consciousness produced the essence of luster, which later received its different names: sunlight, moonlight, starlight, firelight, lightning. Then the sun, fire, lightning, and others are the seeds or roots of the tree of light, caused by the various colors that fill the world. Now we see the evolution from akasha to vayu to agni, fire. 22. Consciousness reflected on the lack of fluidity and produced the liquid body of waters, whose taste constitutes the element and matra of flavor in its subtle form. The desire of the soul for different flavors, rasa, bliss, is the seed of the tree of taste. And it is by the relish of a variety of tastes that the world is to go on its course. And so now we see the evolution of jala or water, fluidity. Then the self-willed Brahma, wishing to produce the visible earth, caused the property of smell to appertain to it from its own subtle element of it. He made his elemental solidity the seed or source of the tree of forms, as he made his own element of roundness underlie the spherical world. These elements, these are the 5 primordial elements, akasha, vayu, agni, jala, and pritivi, are all evolved from consciousness and remain within consciousness, just like bubbles of water rise and subside in itself. In this manner, all beings remain in their combined states until their final dissolution into simple and separate forms. All things, which are only forms and formative of pure intellect, remain within the sphere of divine intelligence, as the subtle form of a big banyan tree resides in the forms of pollen and seed. These sprouted forth in time and burst out into 100 branches. Having been concealed in an atom, they became as big as if they were to last forever. Such is the growth and multiplication of things within consciousness, until development is stopped by its contraction, then weakened in their bodies by its desertion, until they droop down in the end. In this way, the elements in their subtle forms, the 10 matras, are produced in consciousness out of its own volition and are manifested to sight in the formless vignette. Now, the interesting thing about this is, as we become more and more established in the practice of lucid dreaming, we can focus on how the dream arises in the mind. And lo and behold, it arises exactly like this. We can have this experience in our own consciousness during the beginning of a lucid dream. It's a wonderful experiment. Put our attention on this and observe how the fivefold elements arise within our own consciousness and blossom into a lucid dream. These fivefold elements are only the seeds of all things in the world. They are the seeds of the primary momentum that was given to them in the beginning, to our way of thinking. They are the seeds of elementary bodies. But in their real nature, they are uncreated, ideal shapes of consciousness replenishing the world. It is like beautiful poetry. It creates such a wonderful vision in the mind. Chapter 13. On the production of the self-born. Vashishta said, Brahma, when the supreme Brahman remains in his resplendent and tranquil state before creation, there is no essence of ethereal light or heat or even darkness produced in the intellectual spirit. But they lie hidden there, as if buried in oblivion. The being, Sat, that is, God, begins with the attribute of intellectuality, Chaitya. It is from the exercise of intellect, Chaitana, intuitive consciousness, of his intellectual heart, Chaityansa, that the name of mind, Chitta, the memory aspect of mind, is attributed to him. The faculties, Shakti, power, of his intellect, Chit, universal consciousness, are called its intelligence, Chaitana, life, spirit, visible consciousness. Cosmic consciousness, Chit or intellect, from its intelligence, Chaitana, then has the attribute of the individual soul, Jiva, and connection with the intelligible objects in nature. Then, when it is subject to intelligible objects having a subtle, elemental form of the sense of individual self, ahamatra, it can be named Maya or illusion. Then from the excess of this egoism, ahanta, that is full with the purposes of its mind and of the elements of sound and other sense objects, it has the attribute of understanding, buddhi, individual intelligence, the intuitive faculty of direct intelligence controlling the sense organs. The organ of mind, responsible for discrimination and judgment. So we're examining the fine aspects of the earliest part of divine karmic traces. First, there is only pure, undifferentiated being. And then, out of pure, undifferentiated being comes the 10 mantras. the chit, the buddhi, the ego, hanta. Verse 5. This living, deluded, and self-reflecting ego, which we see now as purely illusory, purely the most pure form of Maya, is puffed up with thoughts of all things and looks upon the great tree of the visible world as the great garden for its pleasure and gain. What is it doing? It's taking ownership of what it is creating. Consciousness is assuming the form of ego. But the ego is pure illusion, illusion within consciousness. And this illusion within consciousness is identifying itself being puffed up with thoughts of all things. Verse 6. Living souls, like so many impermanent objects seen in a dream, are made to rise and fall one after the other in this great forest of the world surrounded by skies and space. But the world is as continuous as a grove of karanja plants that grow from unsown seeds, and its elements of water, fire, earth, and air have no regard for anybody, living or dead. The consciousness that is the soul of the universe creates the earth and all other things, like one remembers his dreams. Wherever is the germ of the world, it develops itself in that place. The live elements are the fivefold seed of the world, but the undecaying consciousness is the seed of the fivefold elements. Pankabut, earth, water, fire, air, and space. As the seed, so is its fruit. Therefore, know the world is a form and full of God. Know the spacious sky as the reservoir of the five elements in the beginning of creation. The soul, like the body, is composed of the powers of consciousness and does not exist of itself, but being inflated by consciousness, it extends its fall. But the empty form of consciousness, seated in the spirit of the soul, cannot be composed of solid reality. It is not possible. Therefore, nothing can come from an impossibility. Again, that which is changeable in its form cannot have its sameness at all times. Therefore, if the substance of the five elements is attributed to Brahma from an idea within the essence of his spirit, there can be no immaterial and unchanging Brahma. That is, Brahma also would have to be material and subject to change.